Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of the Wrap. This is Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, WRAL State Government Reporter.
And the election is finally over. We're done looking at those ads for another maybe 2 months, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Laura, I have just enough energy in me to talk about it for a little while, and then I'm filing it. I'm filing it in the back of my brain and moving on.
We're done. Yes, this was some election. It's funny because it didn't seem like election season was as long this time, but it seemed like it was more intense. Not as
Yeah,
intense
and
as a president. Yeah. I mean, not as intense as a presidential year, obviously, but yeah.
and in kind of a weird way, thankfully the problems with election deniers and people causing problems at the polls. I mean, we had some of that, to be sure. You always do. But it never really reared its head, I think, in a way that people feared. We had a very smooth election. I'm only aware of a couple of legislative races that are close and not yet, just everybody agrees, all right, that's over. So, yeah, just a successful election season in my mind, more successful for some than others. But
Of course.
democracy seems to have worked just fine.
It worked just fine. And what made my night is the fact that we had pretty clear winners in just about every race, which is nice. Because there's a lot of these elections we come out of having to go to recounts. And as you pointed out, there's a couple of races. I think Brian Farkas in Pitt County, and Diamond Williams or
Echeverria versus Diamond Williams, yeah, in
right.
Cabarrus County, so one Republican and one Democrat who are behind but have not yet conceded, and it's close, but it ain't that close.
Yeah. So those are both waiting on the final canvas to concede. Anyway, but to go to the big races, obviously, the one at the top of the ticket, Bud versus Beasley. Beasley came out of the box after early voting with a pretty sizable lead. I think it was a little larger than they were expecting to see. So I was at that event, and people were very excited. I mean, they really believed that they could win this and were going to win this. So it was a
Yeah,
kind of a letdown for them, but definitely, they were extremely optimistic.
yeah, I think we saw pretty solid election day turnout, and obviously it tilted Republican. Republicans won all 7 statewide races. That's interesting. I mean, we continue to be thought of as a purple state, but maybe should be thought of more as a pink state. Uh, Candidate recruitment, of course, matters. Bo Hines went down. Sandy Smith went down in the congressional races. Uh, Maybe we'll talk at some point about 2024, but it, I don't know that a Republican too far right can win statewide in this state, and it seems like a Republican who edges toward the center has some real heavy built-in advantages.
Well, I mean, we thought that. I mean, remember during the primary, that was the argument that former Governor Pat McCrory made. He said that Ted Budd was going to be too extreme and he wasn't going to be able to win. Obviously, that wasn't the case. So, and I think you're right though about too far right. Although I was kind of surprised about Hines and Nickel. Not that I didn't think Nickel could win, but just with the political headwinds, that he was pretty clearly favored to lean R, even though that district's pretty much a toss-up. So, I mean, it was pretty clear that there must have been some pretty strong turnout in Wake County, because it looks like Wake County was the only blue county in that district. The rest of them went red, but Wake still managed to outweigh it.
Yeah, Wake County had some of the better turnout in the state. I think it was around 55%. I think that Nickel and his campaign worked hard. I think they worked real hard. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the Hines campaign worked hard too, but I would see him at events not engaging with people like I would expect. I don't know how much he enjoyed running for Congress versus the idea of being a congressman. I don't know that the Hines campaign put the effort that needed to be put in southern Wake County, which was so much of the population center. And then remember, the Johnston County Republicans, they were not big Bo Hines fans. There was that open letter they ran
Right.
basically saying, look, we don't want this guy coming in. But the Club for Growth and the other money kind of carried the day, or helped carry the day for him in the primary. And then when it came time to vote in the general, I just don't know that they came out for him like voters down there could have.
Right. In the meantime, I wanted to mention Paul Space story, our colleague, a great story about why Bud won. And he had a variety of reasons, but one of them that I pointed out that I thought that kind of flagged for me was he wasn't stupid.
Right. Yeah, they ran a competent campaign, and I mean, for all
You would think that would be a no-brainer, I mean, of course.
It's certainly a good idea. Andy's story really is good. It lays it all out, and I would commend that to people. nccapital.com. You can find it there. But I mean, Bud had money. He had the Trump endorsement, as you said. He was not stupid. He had the economy. I think really one thing that helped Republicans was the way they hit Sherry Beasley on crime, whether that was fair or not. I don't know that. There are all kinds of cases that come before a state Supreme Court, and you have to make decisions based on what's good for society and what's within the law. And then when someone drills down on one case and how it impacted one person, whether they be a convicted sex offender or whatnot, I don't know how fair that is, but I think it worked. I think they effectively defined Sherry Beasley in some people's mind with that money and that attack on crime.
Right, absolutely. And, and they kind of stuck to that message. They didn't kind of go all over the map with it. And like I said, I mean, you would think that just running a smart campaign would be a no-brainer, but we certainly saw some this cycle that did not fit that description. But there's also the question of what the Democrats did or did not do to help Sherry Beasley.
Yeah, nationally, they didn't put the money in. It clearly wasn't the priority that a Pennsylvania or some of the other states were in the Senate, race. If the idea is, well, we have to get 50 seats, maybe North Carolina was seat 51, 2, 3, 4, 5 for them as far as priorities. We never saw anyone named Obama come here. As we've talked about before, I certainly think that would have boosted turnout more than any other sort of visit. And we just didn't see the money. Chuck Todd, NBC's Chuck Todd, on election night said that she was basically on her own. That's not what you want to hear if you're trying to.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, she did get some pretty hefty support from some outside groups. I'm thinking of, like, for example, Emily's List came in hard for her. Planned Parenthood did. But, I did not see, DSCC showing up for her. I mean, I did not see that sort of organized party money showing up. So I guess that's probably what he was talking about.
Yeah, that's absolutely what he was talking about now.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we ended up now, as you pointed out in a note to me, we have 5 new members of Congress, and all of them were former state senators.
Yeah, Chuck Edwards out west, Valerie Foushee in Orange and Durham counties, Wiley Nickel, the aforementioned, in the 13th Congressional District, Senator Don Davis, or Congressman-elect, I should say, Don Davis, out in Pitt County in eastern North Carolina, and then Jeff Jackson in Charlotte. And that's 5 new members, all 5 state senators. I mean, I guess it's not a surprise. State Senate is the launching ground for many a political career because the districts are larger than the state house, so you have a larger constituency to kind of build from. But that's 5 for 5 is interesting.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those are Democrats. Interesting there too. And that may change, as was pointed out by Republicans the day after the election, because don't forget, they were running under those maps that were redrawn by the courts this past round of redistricting. Yeah, so they said, it was a 7-7 map, and it performed pretty much as expected. But both House Speaker Moore and Senate Leader Phil Berger said to reporters on Wednesday that one of the first things they'll get to doing is redrawing those congressional maps. Moore says he just doesn't believe that a 7-7 map is a fair reflection of the electorate. And I think with your pointing out that, the Republicans won every statewide race, I think that's probably an argument in his favor.
Yeah, but I guarantee you they ain't going to draw no 8-6 map either. This is going to be 10-4, something like that. And with the new state Supreme Court, that is going to give a lot of deference to what the General Assembly wants to do. I mean, if you look at redistricting decisions, you look at the dissents that Republicans have filed when a Democratic-controlled state Supreme Court has said these are illegal gerrymanders. The argument is very close to, no, the General Assembly can do whatever it wants in redistricting. So you combine the fact that philosophy is now more dominant on the state Supreme Court and the fact that December 7th, Moore v. Harper, that is the redistricting case that we have right now pending before the United States Supreme Court that might end up saying state Supreme Courts around the country have no power over state legislatures when it comes to congressional district redistricting. So this may be kind of whatever they want to do becomes allowed, legal. We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, when you see the range of people that have filed amicus briefs in that case, I mean, it seems overwhelmingly that the legal establishment, courts, everybody seem to be opposed to the idea that our legislators are propounding there. So, you know, I'll be curious to see how the questions go during the oral arguments there. But yeah, as we've been saying, that case could really remake how legislatures can and cannot draw maps in the U.S. I mean, short of a state law or constitutional amendment forbidding gerrymandering, there doesn't seem to be a lot of other recourse for anyone who doesn't agree with whatever maps they draw. So.
And I'll mention quickly, Wiley Nickel is on this weekend's On the Record on WRAL Saturday evening, and I asked him if he's running for re-election, kind of regardless of what the district looks like, and he said yes. I don't know what else, you would expect him to say there, but I'll just throw that out there.
Well, I think we're just going to see a very different election in 2024 as all a different map, I guess I should say. So let's talk a little bit about what may have been the issues that mattered the most in this election. I think obviously, the economy and inflation were kind of number one. I think everybody was kind of expecting that.
Right. And then I think the question that you and I had going in was, all right, we think abortion is going to be a very big deal, as it should be. I mean, that's something that we fight over in society, and we are at a turning point because of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision. And maybe that's the reason that Republicans didn't perform as well as they thought they might or hoped to. I did want to share a quote from Dylan Watts, though. He's the caucus director for Republicans in the state Senate, and this comes from the Wyden and Ted Budd win story that we mentioned earlier. Quote, "We never had any districts across 40 or 50 polls that showed the economy or inflation not in first place." That's in first place as an issue. Quoting again, "The most consistent thing across the polls was abortion was maybe third, maybe fourth best this year, but it was only top with hyper-partisan white Democrats." So Republicans did not see abortion as a huge driving issue, but it doesn't have to be a huge driving issue to be a really important one, right? I mean,
I have a feeling that
some role here.
I was about to say, I have a feeling that had a lot to do with why Nickel won his race and why we saw the kind of turnout. Yeah, and why we saw the kind of turnout in Wake County that we did, I certainly think, a lot of especially, I'll say it, male, political consultants have underestimated kind of where women were with that. And I think we saw that play out. I think we saw it more in other states, though, than we did here. For example, like when you looked at some other states, you saw some serious trends in terms of women registering to vote and women turning out to vote. I don't think we saw that in North Carolina the way that we saw it in a lot of other states. But
yeah,
I think it
did.
The
registration boost didn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it may have also helped some of the Democrats in Wake County that were running against in pretty tight races. I'm thinking about your Mary Wills Bodie, your Sidney Batch, those folks. I have a feeling it may have been a bump for them as well. That may be one of the reasons that sort of the Wake wall really sort of stood up, except for Aaron Perret. The GOP otherwise pretty much lost out.
Yep, absolutely.
So now we come to the question of where we ended up, right? So we got one vote between in the House to uphold the governor's veto. 71 out of 72. They came in one short. So legislative leaders this week said, especially Speaker Moore, said he believes that he has what he called a governing supermajority, because he believes that he's going to be able to sway Democrats to vote to override the governor's veto on given issues. I asked the governor about that yesterday. I was talking to him at an event about some other things, actually, and asked him about it. And he said, well, we do have the vote that we need to stop bad legislation. It will be harder than it was, obviously. He says he's hoping that they can work together more to find consensus and compromise. But he said if the legislature steps up and tries to pass extreme legislation, we will work hard to try to stop them.
Yeah, and I'm of two minds here. Number one, Speaker of the House Tim Moore has been saying for a year he has the votes to overturn various Roy Cooper vetoes. I ain't seen him do it once. So it's kind of like, oh, well, don't worry. We've got a secret plan that we have never used and can't prove we have. On the other side, though, wouldn't surprise me if they were able to overturn some vetoes, either by getting a Democrat or two to come on board with them, or by getting a Democrat or two to take a walk on a key day, or by surprising Democrats with a veto vote. And here's what I'd like to see. When the new session starts in, was it January, I believe, this year?
Yeah.
When that starts, do Republicans right out of the gate try to pass controversial legislation, whether it be on abortion or public education? Do they try to get those things through the legislative process to the governor so that he vetoes them, and then they sit in what we've come to call the veto garage, where they can come up at any given time, particularly in the House, surprise Democrats. Their attendance isn't perfect, and bam, because the veto override threshold is based on attendance, based on total number of members present and voting, and move it forward. So do they do those controversial issues on the front end? That way they've got more time to catch Democrats sleeping, or does that not really need to be a strategy because in North Carolina our sessions are so long and so interminable that there's just plenty of time over the next 2 years to do this?
Yeah, it's hard to say because, I mean, I see your logic there, but at the same time, I think that would kind of poison the well for any kind of compromise they may want to work with, something they may want to get the governor's okay on. I will also mention that, the Democrats now have sort of a cautionary tale on the books to look at for what happens if they do vote to override the governor's veto. And I'm thinking specifically of Kirk Deviere. Val Applewhite had a good night, so she...
Yeah, the governor, of course, didn't like the way Deviere had voted on some things, or at least he had been too close to Republicans in the state Senate. The governor backed his primary opponent, and that was successful.
Yep. So it can happen. And even though Cooper is going to be terming out in 2024, it's hard to say where he goes next, but he still has a sizable war chest and a lot of power. So I don't think you can count him out as a lame duck. Let's put it that way.
You want to run through a couple of quick fire things real quick?
Sure.
All right. I am interested. We talked briefly about Brian Echeverria in Cabarrus County. That's one of the two still kind of close legislative races. But it looks like Diamond Staten Williams, the Democrat, a Harrisburg city council member, has won that race. And so that's the one race that kept Republicans from gaining a supermajority outright in the state house. That's also outgoing State Representative Larry Pittman's seat. And
right.
They've redrawn the district a bit. But I mean, Laura, if
just a bit.
Larry Pittman, for those who don't know, is like the most conservative member, arguably, of the state legislature. He is very far right. If I told you that his old seat would be the one that kept Republicans out of the supermajority, I mean, this is why people are fascinated by politics. You never would have seen that coming a year ago.
No, and I don't think they saw it coming anyway. I think it's figure more sad on Wednesday that they really thought that was going to be a win, and so they were surprised by that one. That was what they were counting on to get to that supermajority. So as you said, that's the one. So yeah, but it was pretty fascinating to see the results there. I'm curious to know. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about 2024 for a moment. Because you had pointed out, if the way that the Republicans performed in this particular election, winning, statewide high-profile races all the way across, what does that mean for Mark Robinson in 2024?
I think it means there are going to be some Republicans either trying to moderate him or trying to get him up out of the paint, get him interested in something else other than running for governor. Now, I don't know what you get him interested in without another United States Senate seat coming up soon. He already took a pass on running for the United States Senate this year. I think it's governor or bust for him. And so I think he will get a lot of Republicans trying to get in his ear to move more to the center and to stop saying so many controversial things. It does not seem to me, look, I don't know this man well. I cover him, but I'm not going to pretend I know him well. But he does not seem like the kind of person to me who will respond to that in a positive manner. I mean, we'll see how badly he wants to be governor here, and maybe that causes him to rethink some of the things that he does. I mean, the most recent thing was posted on Facebook about the attack on Paul Pelosi, and questioning it and kind of making light of it on his personal Facebook page. Laura, why would you do that? Why do you even have a personal Facebook page at this point? You're the lieutenant governor of North Carolina. You want to be governor. You have succeeded beyond it, by your own admission, your wildest dreams. What are you doing? What are you doing spending your weekend posting about Nancy Pelosi's husband on a personal Facebook page?
I cannot pretend to understand the strategy there, if there is a strategy. But, I don't know. I mean, I guess if trying to see it from his eyes, it hasn't hurt him yet, right? He's lieutenant governor. His outspokenness has done nothing but get him into office. So, I think it's a difficult argument to say you should change now when it's worked thus far. And it worked statewide. He's lieutenant governor, so I don't know. I don't know how well that's going to work. But
yep,
he's
lieutenant governor, and I sure am not. So, I mean, look, he seems to know what he's doing so far.
It seems to be working. So we do know that that Dale Folwell, State Treasurer Dale Folwell, seems to be. Is he in, or is he just saying he's interested?
He's saying he's interested, but I will go ahead and bet that he's in.
I would too. So I'm interested to see if anybody else comes out, or if they're going to sort of let it be Falwell v. Robinson. It seems like having a couple more candidates would sort of make sense, but I don't know. Wanted to talk a little bit. I want to go back for a moment to what we were talking to Berger and Moore about this week. And a couple of things they mentioned. Number one, we are not going to see Medicaid reform this year. I think we all kind of knew that at this point. But remember, there had been a lot of talk from Moore that they could come back in December and have a Medicaid session. Well, now that they, had a successful election, I think what we're seeing is they're like, well, let's just wait till January. They don't want to ruin Christmas. So we're not going to see that this year. We did also hear about the possibility of some individual tax rate cuts. And that was coming from Senator Berger. He said we have these surpluses, and that to me means that we're taxing too much. I think some people would argue that means the state isn't spending enough, obviously. But that's not his take on it. So I think we're going to probably see him try. He said it was going to be a personal priority of his to try to get some cuts in the individual tax rate beyond what's already scheduled to happen in the coming year.
Yeah, we've got, I think it was 6 years total, and I can't remember when it started, but it certainly lasts the next several years of step downs in the personal income tax rate and the corporate income tax rates. Berger said that the corporate rate, that plan is probably solid. Although I will say Republicans, particularly in the Senate, have wanted to come after the franchise tax, which is another business tax. It'd be interesting to see if they try to open that up. But the individual rate could stand a little trimming, was what Berger said. Juxtapose that with, the Leandro case, which is ordering the General Assembly to spend more on education. Whether that changes now that we have a new Supreme Court, a Republican Supreme Court, and that case comes back up to the Supreme Court and essentially gets reversed, months after the decision came down, because it came down like a week and a half ago.
It came down. It was actually November 4th was the decision. It's a week old, basically.
Yeah, not even a week and a half ago, 1 week exactly. And then you've also got, there was a hearing yesterday, a legislative hearing on Thursday of this week, where Secretary Buffalo, who heads the public safety secretariat in state government, was bemoaning some staffing shortages at juvenile justice, state highway patrol, not paid enough. They're getting out-recruited by local police forces at the state highway patrol. DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, is saying that it's got a lot of vacancy issues. I mean, so this is all money, right? That's what connects all this is taxes. And exactly. So there has to be this balancing act between tax cuts and what we boost in order to deal with kind of some of these core problems for employees.
Right. And I mean, it's safe to say that they've had staffing problems for some time, right? I mean, DEQ, DPS, they've already been paying below market. But market, with with wages rising, the market is climbing higher and higher, and the state's just not moving. I mean, they get 1% here and a couple percent there, but that's not anywhere close to what's happening in the private side. So it seems clear that they're going to have to radically reconsider what they're paying a lot of these positions if they actually care about having, agencies that work. And obviously, public safety would seem to be a priority. DEQ also, especially after Kimura. So I have not heard anybody talking about that though, or talking about that in any way that suggests that that's likely to get action this year.
I think we can count on CNIC, the State Employees Association, to talk about it, getting people's ear about it. And the good news is there's a lot of money in the kitty. There's a lot of money in reserves. Are we going into a recession? I don't know. The economy, I think, was probably better than some of the. There's no longer a political reason to argue that the economy is terrible. So we'll see how that impacts things. A lot to watch. I'll mention one last thing. I think this is the last thing for me. On Thursday, the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission voted to back the teacher pay and licensure reforms, pretty significant reforms in the way we pay teachers and give them raises over the span of their career. So that moves forward, and that's kind of another thing that will eventually come before the state legislature.
Well, more than likely, it's got to go. Does it now? Did it pass the state board or just the committee?
Just the commission. Eventually, it'll go through the state board. The legislature will certainly get involved. The governor will get involved. This could be a fairly transformational year coming up between that sort of thing and Medicaid expansion. Kind of a lot of big issues that could be coming to a head in 2023.
Yep, and of course the social ones are probably up there as well. So. Although it was interesting to me that we heard Senate Leader Berger say, what we would decide, we need to talk to the caucus and decide what, if anything, we're going to do about abortion. And I thought, well, that's different. But then I remembered back when Dobbs was first out overturning Roe v. Wade, the 20-week ban in North Carolina was still on hold because a court had put that on hold. So the argument that they were making at the time was that North Carolina has no laws at all. When that 20-week ban was allowed to resume, when the judge removed his restraining order, then that at least put that back into place. So it may be, if they find that they're having difficulty coming up with, a compromise that the entire Republican caucus can get behind, it may be their fallback position. I'm not sure. I'll still be very surprised if we don't see legislation this year, though.
Fully expect to see legislation. Exactly how many weeks it'll have in it. That remains a moving target at the moment, at least.
Yeah, I think that's about all for me. I think we're going to enjoy a weekend without politics.
Try to, at least. We'll see what happens.
At least.
Who knows?
Right? What crazy. But of course, next week and the week after, we're going to see some of the legislative joint oversight meetings coming back in, because they've been kind of in limbo because of the election. So we'll see a lot of those probably coming up between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, and technically there's a skeleton session on Tuesday. A lot of times leadership has talked to reporters on those days. We'll see if they keep to that, given that they talked to reporters this week. But I'm sure there'll be new questions, new things to discuss on Tuesday, if they so choose.
But they did at least confirm there will be no votes. No actual votes on substantive issues now or in this month or next month. So anyway, That is a wrap. I guess that's a wrap for us. Thank you for listening to us. If you've noticed, we are no longer a video. We are now podcast only. So if you're listening to this, hopefully you found us, and hopefully you'll hit that subscribe button.
Yep. Thank you. Like and subscribe.
Thanks a lot.